let me start kicking things off. But again, please jump in and ask questions. You can ask questions in advance as well. Like, what are you trying to see? What would you like to see? Whatever sort of you suggest, the audience, everyone that I appreciate so much you coming in, we want to make sure that we cover those topics as much as possible. So anyway, we're going to talk about visually building at scale with Builder.io and Netlify. If you don't know what Builder or Netlify is, you should probably know what Netlify is. Netlify is pretty huge. Builder is up and coming, I would call it. But we'll cover both. Importantly, we have -1 speaker today, so it's going to be the Steve show. It was supposed to be the Steve and Steven show. Steven had a last-minute family emergency, literally about 15 minutes ago. And so that's okay. I had the majority of the slides and demo stuff anyway. And so this will be the Just Steve show. And so again, I want to emphasize, lean on the Q&A, because I think this is a great opportunity to just get your questions answered, get a cool demo and presentation. So I appreciate, everyone here that's interested in the subject matter at hand. And yeah, we'll go ahead and start with some basic housekeeping. So obviously, anybody here, you're in listen-only mode. It would be a little bit madness to have everybody jumping in, most likely over their mic. We're recording the session. And like you heard me kind of rant about, please ask questions throughout. I'm guessing there's some things, I assure you, not everybody knows everything about visually building at scale with Builder and Netlify. So throw the questions in that you want to see answered, as well as we start touching on some of the stuff, especially probably in the demo, I'm sure questions will come to you all. So start adding questions at that time as well. Anyway, check out the code of conduct link if you haven't, to just make sure we keep everything very, very positive and respectful. So we're going to start diving in. Oops, we have a little malformatting on our slide. Forgive me for that. But anyway, we want to talk about sort of the current headless CMS landscape today. And so we all are probably pretty aligned. I'm guessing from the sort of initial information we have a lot of developers here, but some people in product design and marketing roles. So I'll try and lean a bit technical, and obviously any questions that are asked that are very technically leaning, I'll answer in the proper technical way. But I'll also be making sure to not making it too pedantic as much as possible. And for anybody who missed it, actually, forgive me, I'm going to go 2 slides ago briefly, because I realized I did not even properly introduce myself. So let's cover that really briefly. So I'm Steve. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Builder.io. We are a visual CMS. Specifically, my background previously was leading web engineering at a company called ShopStyle. This was a large-scale e-commerce business doing about $500 million in GMV, so driving about $500 million in sales every year. We were live fully headless in 2014, very, very, very early to the what we now would call headless or composable commerce. We would call it like Jamstack on the front end and a microservices architecture on the back end. So very cool in those regards. That meant we were extremely early adopters to things like single-page applications with server-side pre-rendering. We used AngularJS back then. We were very early adopters to headless CMSs and the pros and the cons. And a lot of that led to what you see today, what Builder is built for, and what Builder plus Netlify, in particular, Netlify's extremely seamless developer platform with their dynamic edge functions, really, really nail and solve a serious set of problems we had in the past. So moving back forward, I hope that context is helpful to talk about the advantages and disadvantages we had run into with headless CMSs as you're familiar with today. So the obvious pro here is API-first content management, right? So you're not locked into an entire stack. Like WordPress is cool in some ways, in some sort of legacy, more monolithic systems. It just, everything was out of the box. But customization was complicated. Choosing your front end and your set of frameworks and technologies for the front end and back end were largely not possible. And flexibility is a huge benefit you get with the headless structure because it's just an API and it's almost just like a easy to spin up database that you can read and write to through APIs and a set of user-friendly UIs. It's just ridiculously customizable and flexible to any needs of the structure of the content you want to serve, for any needs of your team and workflows, and as we talked about, any needs of your tech stack. And because of this kind of simple microservices-oriented architecture, they can be incredibly performant because you can both utilize CDNs. Pretty much every headless CMS will deliver very, very quickly from a CDN. You should probably expect a sub 20 millisecond response time anywhere in the world from a headless CMS. But you can also add your own caching layers. Again, the data is intentionally quite simple. So you can add middle layers, you can pre-cache, you can do all sorts of cool things. Now, unfortunately, anytime you get a set of new awesome things, you will get a set of drawbacks, right? One of the main drawbacks you'll encounter is that you are basically just kind of stuck in this world of what we call structured data. Structured data is an amazing thing. It's just, at least the way we think of it and use it today in a headless CMS context, not necessarily the right thing for everything. You could think of structured data as a big spreadsheet, right? Or a database table where you have a flat structure with columns. And that actually works incredibly well for certain use cases. That can work really well for if you just want to have in your CMS a structure for like what the navigation links should be. You know, you have a link item with text and URL. Perfect. Very clean, very simple, plug it in anywhere. Now, when it comes to managing pages, though, this idea of simple fields breaks down a bit. And so our CTO, Mishko, you may know him as creators of Angular and Quick and Karma and whatever, a bunch of other open source stuff, likes to describe this as fields are just not the best primitive for building websites and web applications. They are very, very simplistic. The way we reason about websites and web applications in the modern Jamstack Labs landscape is components, these kind of reusable Lego blocks that you can rearrange in any format. And an important part of the composability is that they are hierarchical. You can have components above and below each other. You can have components inside and outside of each other. And that's one of the biggest things that's very difficult for the standard CMS today to reflect, both from the user experience standpoint, the ability to compose these sets of components, which you could imagine could be done a number of ways. The most rudimentary might be just some type of like, list editor where you have little kind of abstract blocks that you rearrange them, or to the maybe more idealistic format for the end user experience, which is something a lot like a Wix or Webflow or Squarespace, where it's just what you see is what you get. You grab this Lego block, you move it up there, you drop it, you mix and match the pieces in a way that, site builders and other tools that are a little bit more SMB oriented, a little bit more rigid in terms of tech stack. You don't plug them into your tech stacks, but very simple, clean and out of the box, have already proven that is a very nice user experience for managing a website, not like forms like you'd see in a normal headless CMS. That's kind of like managing your website through a very complicated series of Google forms, more just drag and drop and get what you want. And so that sort of kind of leads into the second point here, which is if you are stuck with very simple sort of database tables to manage the complex content of your entire website, that means every level of nuance and complexity actually goes to developers through tickets. So in my last job at ShopStyle, we had a never-ending queue of tickets to change this button color, rearrange this page, make a new landing page with a different layout that's kind of similar to other pages that we have on the site, but a little bit different, maybe a little different styling, maybe a different arrangement of components and stuff like that. And so these sort of little changes that need to happen throughout the site constantly require front-end code updates. You write the components in the code, you pull just little tiny fields from the back end, and you're constantly needing to manage not just that code, but also the fields themselves. So if you want to add maybe a second button to the hero on the homepage, you're maybe adding several new fields. You're adding a new field to say, should you have a second button? If you have the second button, fill out this field too, call it the button text, the button color, maybe it's a picker between just a few standard options. What's the button link? And as you start to add on these simple layers, like we may want a button or not, you end up with these very unwieldy schemas and very complex forms for your non-development teams to fill out. And this very heavily conditional code, which is not always the most elegant. And the last one here is that in that type of simplistic kind of simple structured database table style content CMS format, certain things like A/B testing and personalization require purchasing and integrating other tools, which can be okay. Composability is really great. Just plug in what you want, and a tool like Builder will support that. And many these days, it's kind of a baseline requirement for a modern tech stack, a modern SaaS service. But it can lead to some major inelegances. The rule of thumb we generally have at Builder is one task should involve one tool as much as possible. So if you want to create a new page, you want to run an A/B test of 2 variations of it, and maybe personalize that to your menswear shoppers as opposed to your women's wear shoppers, it's really useful for both the developers and the non-development teams to make sure you can do that workflow in one place. As soon as you have to jump to other products and services and mentally map how you link one thing to another, it can get very complicated, both from a workflow standpoint, a management, a governance. It gets complicated in a number of ways. So the more you can kind of like do one thing in one place, make it very simple, the more many of your teams tend to benefit. Again, I'm covering a lot and I have the tendency to talk fast. So again, jump in with questions at any point that you have them. So anyway, we want to talk about the fact that this doesn't have to be an either or, meaning at ShopStyle, one thing that happened was the marketing team got a bit frustrated with the rate at which the development team could produce new pages, variations, and stuff like that. And so the structured data format, the headless CMS format we were using, was really locked into, that was the only way to build onto this website. To build and customize was fields and templates and code and deployments. And there's even whole portions of the year that, say, in an e-commerce business will not deploy new code. You might need new pages of promotions to go out for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, et cetera, but nobody's going to deploy code during those time windows because that's just too dangerous. You don't want to just hot swap your code base live because the risk of anything going wrong on those key purchasing periods is just too great. On the extreme flip side is you have site and page builders. So at ShopStyle, the marketing team at one point was like, hey, maybe we can solve our own problem. They went and grabbed Webflow. They dragged and dropped to create a beautiful page that they had been waiting for like 3 months. Like literally, I had been hearing about, I was leading that engineering team. I'd been hearing about this new promotional page they wanted forever. They went in Webflow and they made it in a few days. It was very simple, drag, drop, done. It was spot on to what they needed. And so they bring it over to me and they're like, hey, can we just kind of like copy paste this onto the Angular site? Like, how do we get this Webflow page onto the Angular site? And of course, that led to quite a long series of questions of, well, how exactly would that work? Because you can't embed it like a YouTube video, like with an iframe. You can't just copy and paste it. And the reverse wouldn't work either. We can't just take all of the ShopStyle custom components and custom e-commerce catalog and plug it into Webflow. These things were just not meant to combine in any of these kind of more composable API-driven ways. And that's essentially effectively what Builder was built to solve, is this idea of, well, what if you could still have structured data provided by Builder or provided by another CMS? You can use multiple CMSs on a site that could be integrated or just side by side. But what if you could augment that with what we call visual editing? What if you can build pages or sections of pages with a drag and drop interface, so you don't need to run to other tools and have these really kind of messed up ways you try and integrate them or just end up failing, and just make it as easy to integrate into your website as an API call. In our case, with a simple SDK that knows how to do the rendering. So the integration is simple, the performance is great, and your various teams are effectively kind of getting what they need out of this equation. So that's what we call essentially a visual CMS. The idea here is take the baseline of a headless CMS. Builder originally was a headless CMS, meaning it was a simple way to have a form where you fill in inputs that is based off of a schema developer created that's delivered over an API, the basic construct of a headless CMS with publishing, versioning, you know, all that good stuff. And then it was like, well, what if we had a field type just called, we called it blocks, like drag and drop a set of blocks. So everything else remains at par for headless CMS. It's just you have a special type of field where you can do a full visual editing, either as freeform, as something like Webflow or Squarespace or Figma, just drag and drop, make anything you want, or as rigid, as you could only use your design system of components in your code and drag and drop with those. So everything is guaranteed on brand, but it's still significantly less maintenance for a development team because you just take your design system, you register it in Builder, we can cover what that looks like, and then people can build with that system and it's always in sync. So this integrates seamlessly, which was the whole idea. Dragging and dropping was the pipe dream, and we figured out a clever way to make that work. And then just publish new pages, new A/B tests, personalized variants, etc. And when paired with a killer service like Netlify, those go live pretty much instantaneously. And you can use splitting at the edge, which we'll cover in a moment, completely automatically to make sure that one page actually can look different to different audiences based on A/B tests and personalization, like shopping history and stuff like that. So we want you to have complete control over your content workflow, and we want it to be modern, lightweight, and fast. So what's really, really interesting here is kind of what I was saying before. All of this fancy stuff that I will demo is still built on top of the foundation of a headless CMS. You can consider this a superset of a CMS, of a headless CMS, sorry, where you get all the basics that you're used to with a headless CMS, and then you can build on top of it, as in add the full drag and drop editing and stuff like that. And I actually kind of want to pull forward one question on Market Answer Live. So for anybody who's not able to see the question section, one question that just came in from Grace is, I love it. It said that Figma integration is incredible. How does it work when it comes to responsiveness? Haha, that's actually extremely cool. So I might be able to answer this one live with a demo, and please keep throwing in questions. I kind of want to answer them in real time so that we kind of keep the conversation focused where people want. But yeah, so those who don't know, Builder not only has a Figma style editor, it can also import content from Figma and make it automatically responsive so long as you are using Figma's auto layout feature. So that's the one basic requirement. Figma has a pretty cool feature built in for describing responsive UIs. And so as long as you use the auto layout feature, we can import that, and we can add a couple additional basic heuristics that say things like, if you have two large regions side by side, we consider those columns in Builder so that when the page gets smaller, they will just stack vertically. And so the responsiveness becomes effectively automatic. So that was an amazing question. I'm glad you think the Figma integration for Builder is incredible. And I might be able to demo that in a little bit as well. But anyway, I'll move on since I've already kind of covered the basic content of this slide anyway. But here's the last thing to sort of be aware of, is this integrates completely seamlessly with your stack. A lot of people see drag and drop and you think of historically, well, how did every drag and drop tool work ever? It was a way to manage it and dictate the entire stack of your entire website. And sometimes these things are poor performing, they were not very powerful, and they were not very flexible. And this is where we're kind of flipping it on its head and saying like, well, does it have to be that way? What if you took an API first approach so that you own the tech stack? You already have a Next.js site deployed to Netlify, plugged into Shopify and Yotpo and other services. What if you just layered visual editing into that, just like you would a headless CMS, but instead of being locked into a structure for all things, the structure is really good for certain things and we embrace that. But what if you actually could allow your marketing team to just create pages and content without you having to be involved as a developer all the time? And obviously the flip side should be pretty clear as well. What if you're a marketer, designer, or product manager, and you can just open the website and make a change? Obviously there's roles and permissions here, so it's not like anybody can do anything. The system can be as locked down to who, what, and how should edit as you need. But anyway, it's a very, very seamless, and it's really just an API integration into your stack that you fully control. And the very last thing that I think is particularly exciting, it's one of the most unique joint value propositions of using Builder with Netlify, is you get all of that seamless simplicity that you're already used to, but you get a much more modern and high performance way to personalize content. So briefly to touch on what does traditional personalization look like and how does this new paradigm fix it? Traditionally, and this is what happened at ShopStyle. So we need to start, the very first ask came in, which is like, okay, ShopStyle has a homepage, yet we have about 90% women's wear shoppers and about 10% menswear shoppers. And so the marketing team does the obvious smart thing. It's like, well, let's not show everybody women's wear on the homepage if a solid, serious amount, and ShopStyle had a lot of traffic. So this is like millions of people are coming in who shop menswear, where we're showing an entire page of irrelevant content. We're showing women's wear, everything. And you can guarantee that conversions will be lower from the menswear shoppers if they're not seeing anything relevant to them whatsoever. And so they ask, okay, what if we want to customize just for menswear shoppers? And the first thing as we did is we started looking at a couple options. Option one was render every single page server-side on the fly. So every single visitor that comes into the website, we send the request all the way around the world to an origin location. We generate a fresh page just for them. We send it all the way back. that can have some serious latency times and not be best for performance. As we know, we want to use global deployments and serving from the edge and serving from a cache as much as possible, so the pages are pre-populated and immediately deliver, as opposed to be fetching and rendering and creating, generating content repeatedly on the fly. The other technique that we explored, which is another common traditional technique, which is either used instead of or in combination with the first one I mentioned, is blocking JavaScript, using tools that add a blocking script tag at the very top of the page that make it so that the page is already delivered, but that blocking script is downloading JavaScript that then injects changes into the page from an external kind of way, just straight up DOM injection. And that leads to obvious additional painful issues of blocking JavaScript taking 10, 20, 100 milliseconds to download and execute before the page becomes visible. And second, if you're using modern frameworks like React or Vue or Quick, you can end up with situations where the injected content and the rendered content by the framework disagree with each other. So as soon as you scroll or click on a page and React does a diff and update, it could wipe out those injected changes because two separate systems are fighting over what content should display on the page. So neither of those things are what we want. At the end of the day, the ideal here is to pre-generate as needed multiple variations of the page from the server, so no injections or weird blocking JavaScript, and then to dynamically immediately serve them. So the edge will say, oh, you fit into this bucket, you're going to see variation A, or you fit into this bucket, you see variation B, and just to send it immediately with that 30, 20, or even 10 millisecond response time. And the beauty is with Builder and the systems we have for this, which as you'd imagine, once people start dragging, dropping, making changes and finding how easy it is, the next thing they ask is, well, how do I now make variations for subsets of audiences like menswear, women's, or shoppers, A/B tests, stuff like that. And so with the combination of that kind of simple, easy to use visual editor with the ability to deploy and split from the edge automatically with an edge function, we get it both together. And I can show some code snippets here in a moment. But anyway, now we get into a demo. There's another good time to remind all of you, there's a poll that should have gone out that I would love it for you to answer so we can get more kind of real-time feedback as we go, as well as hammer on the questions, because as soon as we start demoing, a lot will probably come up. So let's hop over here, oops, and let's go to, I use the Arc browser, so browser navigation will be a little stranger than usual. Anyway. Now we're into the Builder dashboard, dark mode specifically. Sorry, I had to let my dog out. So let's go into this. And I'm going to start with just showing off actually the basics of this site. So I have a simple site based off of the Next.js Commerce Starter. So this is just, again, a standard React and Next.js app. Now, what's cool about it is you can hook it up to any commerce backend. If I navigate around, we can go check out shirts and jackets and anything else here, and things load ridiculously fast. This is a statically pre-generated site. This is deployed to Netlify, and it just works at just ridiculous lightning speeds. So that's amazing. We want to retain that above all else. We also have this beautiful design system of React components that are responsive, interactive, and all of that. But let's say, for instance, we want to start making some edits to this homepage. This homepage is admittedly a little bit boring. So let's go over there and do that from Builder. So right now, my basic site structure, this should look a lot like a normal headless CMS, except a little boring because there's only one content entry. There's just a basic page in here. So let's just make a new page from scratch. We'll make a homepage. It's called our v2, and the URL should just be /. Jumping in here, we will get our visual editor. I've got everything in dark mode here, and let's start building something. So the first thing you could see is this is our set of React components. So we have that hero that you saw, and we can start filling in the props. This is literally a React component that is unedited. This was part of the starter, and in Builder, we just registered it. So we call a little function that says register component, give it a name, and we can also specify what the prop types are with a little more detail than just a string. Like, is it a text field? Is it a color? Is it rich text? Stuff like that. And as I type hello world, we can see it update in real time. This is just my React component updating with new props. We can see it be nice and beautiful and responsive, and everything is fully on brand and on the design system. I have a cool component for a container. So this portion of the page will not get too wide for a very large screen. And I can start adding some products. I think this is a fun one because you can actually see the products update in real time. Maybe I'll add 2 product cells side by side. The columns work a little bit like Notion, if you're familiar with that. And I can click in and make some changes. Let's show the shirt and the jacket. And to make things a little more visually interesting, we can try some different formats. We have this simpler variant and we have this cool slim variant. And I can produce infinite types of pages. If you can make a React component for something, it can be a building block where you fill in the props, see it in real time. And obviously we can publish it, but I'm going to do something else cool in a moment. Some other components we have these nice buttons, we have these nice collapsible menus. You get real-time feedback here. So if you have a button without a link, it will notify you. You will not be able to publish and you can enter it. And this is the basic experience. Oh, I should have mentioned too, you can also have blocks inside of other blocks. So these accordion menus, we can have contents inside. I can use nice keyboard shortcuts to duplicate contents. You can make some really rich, beautiful things. And you can lock this down to be as precise and limited of a design experience or as completely flexible as you want. So let's take it one level further. And let's assume that I'm not just a basic editor that's stuck within a system of components. One thing that happened at ShopStyle a lot is we would get a request. Well, what if we wanted to add a button to this component? So in this component at the top, this hero, I only have 2 options, primary text and secondary text. That's great until you might need a button inside of the thing, or you might want something more visual. I will admit this completely black and white look is not very exciting for this page. One thing that happens a lot when it comes to marketing content is what we call ephemeral content, meaning a marketing team needs to have something special for a one-day sale. Let's say we can use Everlane as a great example of this. Everlane wants to, for a one-day sale, have a full page takeover the homepage with a huge, beautiful video and a simple piece of text and call to action. Now, a normal workflow would be, hey, developers, please make a component that's going to live on the website for 24 hours and then go in the trash. That, I can say from my own experience as a developer, is a horrific experience. I just don't want to do that. Now, a lot of businesses, when it comes to marketing and our experience, they really, really need to stand out. They need to have a sale page that looks like no other. Everybody's browsing around Black Friday and they want to make something that really stands out, catches your attention, and is punchy. So there's this really key constraint going on where engineers want to build reusable pieces that last, and marketers want to create unique, exciting, bespoke experiences for key moments, but moments that really are one time and done. Next Black Friday can have a very different hero or maybe a very different landing page. And we often in marketing want to experiment. We want to run tests, and if something doesn't work, we want to throw it away. And engineers ideally don't want to have that inside of their code base, these kind of tests that were thrown away. You don't want to have throwaway components in your code base. So that's where we add complete bespoke editing. This can be extremely locked down to people under very specific circumstances, like they're part of the design team, they have a separate roles and permissions instead of privileges, and maybe they can only do it to confined areas. Maybe they can only do it on a certain landing page or a certain portion of other pages. But when you unlock that, you can do exciting things. So let's say we're going to move forward with that. We're tired of this boring hero. We are going to instead go bespoke. So what I mean by that is just totally custom outside of the boundaries for one time. And so I'm going to go reach down to our primitive blocks here. These are the most primitive elements for boxes, text, and buttons, stuff like that, columns, that you can make literally anything out of. And we can show some customer examples, but think of it as your text rectangle image pieces in a design tool like Figma. So I'm going to drag this image to the top, and I'm going to resize it down just a little bit. Maybe I want it to be a pretty big, cool, spectacular thing. There we go. And I'm going to delete this. Now I could put any image I want in here. I've already solved one problem, which is I want something more visual. So maybe I want to show off a new set of backpacks. There we go. Nice visual backpack. But you know, this is cool. It's attention grabbing, but we want to have some content. So I'm going to drop some text in here. And now I want to actually make sure that this is going to be an H1. So we'll switch that to be H1. And oops, I'm using Tailwind. So H1 doesn't even affect the styling. That's up to you. A rule of thumb with Builder is the content in Builder is just like if a developer wrote it in code. So if you wrote an H1 right in your code base and it's styled like this, then that's how it's styled. It's nice because you can have complete control over these things. How do buttons look? How does anything look? Or is it all locked down to your design system? Like some people would just have a heading component that's a separate block. You control completely these blocks, which is kind of fun. It's kind of like building your own site builder or page builder visually. But anyway, so I want this to be a little bit more interesting. I'm going to do one more thing and add a button. And this is getting somewhere, but it looks bad. Let's make it look better. Let's first add a link in here so that it stops warning me that the button needs a link. And let's go over to the style tab. This is where you as a developer save a lot of time because those you trust with your design system can actually start going in and editing this like it were Figma. We can make edits, we can make it responsive and beautiful. We can add our text like shop or Black Friday backpack special. And again, the button is still our design system. It's got our hover effects. This is our standard H1 with maybe a special spectacularly large size as one time. And we can make edits per device size. Like for instance, I want to make this a little bit nicer centered for tablet. And I think for the mobile size, the text is a bit large. So I'm going to scale back on that. And I think I would like to add a little bit of padding on both sides equally. And there we go. And now we've made essentially a new unit of this website completely from scratch. We can tweak any detail of it, what the minimum height is. We can instead make this section in here. I can hold shift, group it, and center it vertically. Again, you can get as crazy as you want here. And so another thing we can do from here is we can save this as what we call a template, you know, shiny backpack hero. And now that's a reusable block, a bit like a component that anybody can use across the site anywhere. And so from here, this is pretty cool. And I can publish this. I'll look at, this is just our main homepage. But let's do a couple additional things. We can specify a few things, like maybe this should go live on a certain date range, like we talked about Black Friday. So maybe that's the date range we pick. Or we can make it go live for a subset of the audience. One simple way to subset is to use an A/B test. So we can jump in here and do that. Let's say, for instance, we're smart, and instead of just guessing what people want to see, we actually run a test. So maybe we actually make it so that the test group sees this new cool visual thing. And let's actually make it so the default group goes back and sees the normal hero. And so from this menu, I can actually add the normal hero back, delete that, and there's our A/B test. This will split the traffic 50-50, and we can customize as many groups as we want. This is probably a good time to answer one question of Joel's, which is, does this work with Google Analytics, Microsoft Clarity, et cetera? And the answer is yes. So that's a key kind of component of being headless, API-driven, composable, is it can work with or side by side any set of tools. So very, very common that people will integrate or just use on the same site Google Analytics or other analytics providers, and then everything continues to work as expected. Anything you already use continues to work, and you can integrate any part of Builder with other tools. So maybe you want another system to manage the A/B test groups. Those things similarly can be plugged right in. Joel asked, what other questions? This is actually a really good one. How can you tell if changes apply to all sizes or just one size? So that follows the rules of CSS, and we give some hints in here. So basically, any change to the style tab will influence just the existing size. So let me actually go back to the other variation we made, and let me go to tablet. And as you can see, if I click on this text, we get two big callouts. One is that style changes will affect tablets and smaller. So the style tab is here. Only those with permissions can touch this. You can decide that your marketing team, content editors, translators, whatever, aren't allowed to touch styling, and potentially nobody in your company. Maybe you want to be component driven completely, and that's normal and okay. Anything like options and other things, it'll be clear these changes will affect all device sizes. The reason is this is just how CSS works. And a really key thing that Builder is really kind of intense about is following web best practices. So CSS, responsive CSS is great for performance, great for ADA accessibility, all of that, great for SEO. So we're going to do that. And anything that would not be best for performance, best practices, accessibility, and SEO, we won't do, such as large scale paint changes. There is one caveat here, though, and we'll get to this, but our targeting system can allow you to target significant variations to different devices. So you actually can make wildly different variations for different devices and target it accordingly, and the edge will split those. Or you can do a common trick, which is you can make multiple versions of something, and you can choose to show and hide it by device size. So maybe here, for example, we're going to actually say that this hero is completely hidden for tablet and mobile, and we design a custom one that's only visible for desktop. So there are common best practices for making things more different than just style difference for different devices, with the keynote being we want everything to perform great and be just a best practice all around. Let's see. This is a great question. So Drew asked, can editors or designers get structured data from backend systems and use them in their designs? For example, catalog data for creating a product specs section. Yes, completely. So there's two ways of doing that, and I will show you how to do that now. So again, inside a builder, we want to dynamically pull data from other sources. And so one way is it's built into the components. So for example, what I'm showing here, this product cell, we might call it, or a little product kind of peak widget, is fully connected to the catalog. So the moment that price changes, the availability changes, the name or the picture changes, it changes live here in Builder. But you can do this, directly in the visual editor. We actually have this really awesome feature. We have this data tab, and you can pull data from other sources and connect it visually here. Now, I don't have a good data source integrated with this space, but I may be able to make one briefly. Why don't I come back to that? I can actually do a side note of creating some data and connecting it here. And again, the data doesn't need to be created in Builder. It can come from any backend system, but you can connect it completely visually. In fact, actually, I can show you one cool thing briefly. If I remember, there's an API called randomuser.me. There we go. I think this is what I want. So let's actually do this from a raw API. There we go. I will show you how the visual editing works. So normally you'll use our integration. So you don't have to copy and paste API URLs. You just click a button, say, I want it to come from Shopify, and it's there. I'm going to do something a little bit lower level, and I'm going to add manually a data source. So I'm going to call this users, and I'm going to paste the URL in here. Cool. So again, when you use an integration, which we have for many systems, you don't have to do that step. You just say, give me the stuff from whatever service you're using. Now, what's really cool is we can start attaching that data to stuff. So I'm going to do something cool really quickly. And I'm going to add a little section in here to show this off. Maybe I'll add some columns. Maybe I'll put it up above here. There we go. I am going to add maybe an image and a piece of text. And I'll duplicate that. I'll make a series of these. I'm going to change the layout. Forgive me, I'm going fast intentionally here. And maybe I want to make each of these maybe 200 wide. And I'll add like a flex gap in between. Oops, I want to add the gap to the container. Okay, so here's the cool thing. I can go over to our data tab and I can do a lot of stuff. So one, this is a little bit more advanced, is I can repeat. So I can say, hey, let's loop over for every single user that we have in our user results. And so once we do that, we should be able to connect things inside of here. In fact, let's go and let's choose, oops, sorry. So let me explain what I'm doing briefly. I'm going into the image and I'm like, hey, I want to dynamically pull this image. So in the case of the image, I want to pull their picture, the large picture. There we go. And in the case of the name, I'm going to bind it. Forgive me for going fast. I just want to demonstrate the feature and not go extremely deep in the weeds. But let's pull in their name. They probably have a full name, a username, sure. And so this can be information coming from anywhere. We automatically did schema discovery on that backend source, and we pulled it in. You might notice one other thing, which is we only have one results. I think random user API by default only returns one. I'm sure there's some other way to have a repeat, but normally, let's go back to this because I think it's fun to show the repeat. There's a way to specify how many users that we want. Users number. I'm going to make a wild guess really briefly and just say maybe I need to go 4. Nope. Anyway, there's some type of limit parameter, but it's cool when you show grids. But anyway, anytime that data updates, it'll reflect automatically. So that could be product data, that could be CMS data, that could be content from another CMS. That could be literally any data you have in Airtable, whatever. So you can build rich dynamic things, save them as reusable pieces, etc. Forgive me, that was a pretty deep in the weeds question, but I think it's a fun one to show. And I'll delete that because that's not quite so pretty on my page, but you get the idea. Here's another cool question from good old anonymous attendee. So by any chance, can we export the templates that are created and saved in the visual editor as regular React components, or they're their own separate thing? You actually can. And so let me see if this is a good example. Yeah, so check this out. So at any point, we can actually open up the code and we can grab this as React code. And this is involving any sort of bespoke content we made. In fact, if I undo a bit, I might be able to get those, that cool dynamic stuff back. There we go. And we can open this up. And yeah, and so what's really super neat here is that we can grab any of this as React code. So if at any point you're like, what I made visually, I want to have in my code base, whether it's using divs and styles and CSS, or if it's using my components, like this knows this is my hero component or product cell component, copy paste into your code base. So this is really nice for just ejecting at any point. You're like, hey, marketing made something cool. They imported it from Figma. They made it from scratch. I just want to bring it into my code base and own this now. Awesome. You could do it at any point. Now, what sucks is copying and pasting code all the time. That's why Builder by default works over APIs to deliver this content over an API so that you don't have to copy and paste, but you can mix and match and you always kind of have this ejection first format. Let's see. Yes. And so another question from Grace is, what kind of permissions or access types can be granted? For example, I would like my marketing, dev, designer teams to have different editor access and very limited access for text, image sections for clients. And so spot on. So basically, I'll show you a cool little tool we have here. Let me clean this up yet again. And so here are some of the built-in roles we have. Let's start with an admin. I'm an admin, I can do all the things. Obviously, only very few people in your organization, if not just a single person, has that. A developer is one step removed. A developer can do literally everything besides manage billing and add and remove users. Designers are the only, so this actually gradually reduces. So once you're a designer role, and this could be completely customized, I'll touch on. The designer role can do basically everything you've seen here. Besides, like I mentioned, manage subscriptions and users, and they can also not edit code. So one thing that you will find if you're a developer, you actually do have some low-level control to be able to go in and add little pieces of code to add missing functionality if you want. Depends on how advanced your use case is, but the real goal of Builder is to never be locked in or stuck. We never want you to say, oh, the visual editor can't do this thing. We got to migrate this all to code. No, no, no. You can plug code in directly. But again, a designer permission will not have that capability. The most common and the default is editor. Editor cannot edit any styling. So an editor is only capable of adding in blocks and customizing the options, like what is the text, what is the image. And then if you go one level further down, a contributor is only somebody who can edit the most basic fields. So the contributor cannot even change the layout. They only can just say, I need to edit that text. This is completely customizable. You can add custom roles to say certain roles can only access certain parts of pages, types of content. We didn't even cover that you can make sections of pages, not just full pages in Builder or structured data. Again, we can't cover everything. We only got 12 minutes left anyway. But I hope you get the idea. We have a doc. If you just Google search Builder roles and permissions, we have a whole doc on how super duper granular and fine-grained you can be, because we have big old giant customers who have very complicated, very precise needs from the roles and permissions. Let's see. I'm going to try and answer a couple more questions, and maybe I'll show a couple more things. Yeah, so Joel asked a cool question. I actually might have a demo of this. Let me demo this one. So Joel asked, can this be used to design user dashboards for more interactive apps instead of commerce? So yeah, my demos are frequently commerce because it's just a good use case, but there's so many other things we can do. I'm tempted. I actually want to do something kind of fun. And let me show you a cool dashboard example. So here's another interesting use case where let's make a dashboard. And this is different space, different website. This is a Next.js application. Oops, I'm supposed to be running a local server. Oh, I am running a local server. Perfect. So now I'm in Builder. And you can see in this case, I can create and edit dashboards. And so I have a set of components. I have this filters component, We're pretending this is like an Apple store or something with like iPhones and stuff. And then I can add in things like I want to have a chart and I want to have a table. And what's cool here is we can edit the different options. Now, these are just React components. I used Apex charts for the charts. I used Material UI data grid for the data grid. This is a Material UI app. And I can go in and customize things. Like maybe I want this to be a line chart. Maybe I want to have a different height. I actually am pretty fond of the pie chart because it looks cool. I can change the amount and types. And I actually have this application hooked up so that as I tweak filters, this will actually tweak the data below it. So we can build these rich dashboards. We can dynamically pipe data sets together, stuff like that, which I think is pretty cool. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the versatility here. I'm showing an e-commerce demo, but it's not unique to e-commerce. You can make a wide variety of things, and we have quite a wide variety of customers. But I'm going to switch back to my Edge personalization page. And I'm going to keep going through questions. Again, I can show you all kinds of crazy stuff, like creating the personalized variations. One thing that I hadn't shown yet is how I can, and maybe I'll do this, I can specify different audiences to show my different versions too. So this cool stuff that I made here previously, before I publish it, I can actually specify this will only show to a certain locale, to certain types of users. In this case, I want to target this to the audience is shirt shoppers. That's arbitrary. I probably should have made a more shirt-oriented page, like, hey, if you love this shirt, see these shirts, but you get the idea. I can show you a debugging tool here in a moment for that. Let me mark one of these answers off. Answer live, done. Yes, so Drew wants to see the edge function, so I want to show you exactly that. And so let's go back over here and remember one thing for me, which is, and I'm actually going to modify this. You are a shirt shopper. Shift, perfect. This is because later, once the cache populates, the current website has no traffic, so it takes a moment for the incremental static regeneration to populate. It's based on request. It's just an XJS thing. I'm going to put it here too. Hello, shirt shopper. Cool. And so what's really neat about this is let's actually go to the code. So this is a normal Next.js commerce site. I'm going to go to the middleware.ts, and here we go. So we added this tiny little function for Edge middleware. We added one time. We can share maybe afterwards the repo here, but it uses a very cool technique. So I added a log in here, and we can open Netlify in a second to see the logs happen, which is really neat. But right here, we basically just, for every request, we do a basic URL rewrite so that we can get any critical information right here in the URL. So what that means is, I'm going to go back over to something we have called the Studio tab to show this. But before I do that, I also want to go to netlify.com because I want to show you the logs for this. So logging in and then heading over to, I think Dashing Buttercream is my app. Here we go. Here's my Edge function running. There we go. And so somebody's viewing this site right now. I don't know who or how they got the URL, but yeah, let me go and get this URL and I'll show you. So as I'm navigating the site, it's picking up on some key information. So when I go to the shirt page, we just have some code that says, hey, tag this as a shirt shopper, arbitrary. It could be in your CDP, your customer data platform. It could be custom. The idea here that's critical is it just has to be saved in a cookie somewhere, because the cookie is your very simple communication layer between the Edge function and between the Edge function and the browser. So navigating around, etc., refreshing, cookie save state and sync state to that Edge function. So the way this works is we're setting these things as we go, return visitor, etc., and then those can be looked up later. And so going back over to the Studio tab, what's really cool is because we know what types of attributes you sent us, you can start tweaking things and previewing things, preview different locales, audiences, etc. And so I can see here, what do my jacket shoppers see? They see nothing special at all. What do my shirt shoppers see? There we go. Shirt shoppers see this. Now, keep in mind, this is still the home page. I'm just looking at the home page, but if you're a shirt shopper, you're going to see this version. In fact, I happen to be in the version 2 test group. Remember, we had 2, so it's all automatic and done at the edge. If I go back over here, again, you saw that I previously browsed the shirts tab, so I see the shirt shopper page. This is just the home page. Sorry, I use a weird browser, so maybe it's less familiar. If I go incognito and I paste this page, I'm instantly delivered the generic page. So again, very dynamic pages, all delivered on demand via that edge function. If we go to the edge function code, what we will see in the Netlify dashboard, which is really cool, it's served by Dino, which is extra cool. I absolutely love Dino and the Dino team. They're amazing. Dino creator created Node.js, Ryan Dahl, blah, 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 coolest thing ever. What we're logging here is the rewrites we're doing. So we're rewriting internally, and this is seamless. You saw I had that little bit of code. Well, this is infinitely rewriting pages, so I can infinitely personalize. I can make 1,000 personalized variations of anything, and I'm never pushing new code. It's completely automatic and lightning fast and edge cached and edge handled edge compute. So I'm rewriting slash, because I was visiting the homepage, to slash and this ugly hash. What this ugly hash decoded is what your audience is. So in my case, the audience is shirt shopper. There's a certain date that's going on, the device, stuff like that. So this is all just stuff that's happening, tagging who I am, so that I can see different versions of the page and they deliver instantaneously. So that part's really fun. I'm so glad somebody asked about it because I wanted to show it, but I still want to keep this relevant. And so I'll mark that one off. Does Builder work with AWS? Yes, it works with AWS. I will say deploying to AWS is not nearly as seamless as Netlify, but yes, you can use any hosting platform, you can use any framework, but I would highly recommend considering Netlify for extremely seamless deploy, extremely robust infrastructure, and completely dynamic. Let's see, there's a lot of questions in here. We have 5 minutes left. I'm just gonna go crazy. I'm finding some easy ones. Yes, another question that came in, can you build web apps that can also be pushed to iOS and Android apps right using Builder? Yes. Now, again, Builder's headless as an API. So all you have to do is have an Android or iOS app and you hook Builder into it. Builder can use essentially progressive web app format. So web technologies, it can use React Native or it can use full native iOS, Android, same deal, using your components from your code base. Recording will be available. Yes. I want to show one more thing. Actually, version control was a good example. Let me answer this one briefly too. How does Builder manage version control? If you can edit code directly in the editor, then is this separated into branches? I feel like the code base could get complicated if this is the case. That is a great question. So Builder uses its own basic system for basic versions. Generally speaking, I would not recommend putting hardly any code in Builder. You want that to be inside of your Git, inside of your version control. And so importantly, Builder does not write code anywhere. The Builder integration is extremely simple. All you do is add an API call into your code, and you generally just compose with Builder. And then you can make infinite versions of pages roll back to prior versions and stuff like that. It's probably a deep topic I can't get too into. Just think of it like a typical headless CMS in that regard. Okay. Session. Okay, there's a lot of remaining questions. I just want to show one last thing, and then we can all kind of get out here effectively on time. And so the last thing is I showed editing pages. I want to be clear that that is just one subset of the things that you would do. It's one of the most unique things that you can do that is Builder specific, but I seem to have lost my Builder tab here. So let's just, oh, there we go. There we are. And so I want to show you one more thing, which is editing portions of pages and just what that looks like. We have this model called product editorial. And another very common use case is to decide a piece of the page to manage in Builder. It's very common that if you break apart a website, certain regions, marketing is going to want to change and modify all the time. You don't want to necessarily have that soldered into your code base. You want people to be able to change it within the boundaries that you specify as a developer to keep things on brand, perform, etc. But sometimes you don't want to have an entire page be code or you can call it not code, low code, whatever. So a very common use case is editorializing a product page. So similar stuff, you may want to go in here and be like, hey, this, maybe let's put it in here and let's say, hey, this shirt looks great with a jacket. And then we could go in and add a product cell and be like, hey, here are some awesome jackets to browse. Once you do that, one other cool thing that you can do is you can look at analytics. And so I'm making just a region of a page. This could be any piece of a page, a small or large. This can be structured data. We'll be out of time to show that, but you can fill in the form and see a real-time preview for that as well, or use another CMS for that if you like. But one last thing I do want to show is you make all this content, you think it's super duper cool, and it truly is, but you're going to want to, in some cases, look at analytics. So we're going to open the Insights tab, and there we go. And this is going to show you the traffic and clicks and engagement, conversion rate, if it made money. But the really cool thing I want to show is the heat map. So what's really neat here is if you're making all these bespoke compositions, you want to know, what are people clicking on? Now I can actually see here, we've had 3 clicks of the shirt and we've had 4 clicks of the jacket. Not very significant, but when you have large amounts of traffic, being able to visualize all of this in a heat map is amazing. And most importantly, many heat map tools don't know the structure of your content. So they're very bad for performance because they actually snapshot the HTML and assets and send it in real time from a user's browser to the back end of the service. In Builder, we are able to do it with essentially 0 cost. We have a blog post on that, but we're at 1 minute, so I need to wrap things up. Just know we love performance, all that stuff. I'll just kind of end on this slide. So what I want to say here is thank you to everybody that came. I hope I didn't go too rapid fire and stuff. I quite enjoy getting caught up in the questions and the answers and demoing the cool stuff. It's probably obvious, but I wildly appreciate you all attending. I think this was extremely fun, and I appreciate all the questions that came in, kind of as expected as we demoed. You can find more information here. We'll follow up with more information too. You can try Builder for free and Netlify for free, and you can contact our teams. There's links on the website. The code for this is open source. I think we should be able to follow up with that, but you can just search Next.js, builder.io, edge personalization, all that good stuff. And let me make sure, oops, there goes my screen share. But I just want to say thank you so much for everybody. We will include a follow-up. And you can reach out to me. I'm Steve8708 on Twitter. And I think this is where we can sign off of the webinar. And, you know, I'll be around. Tweet at me.